think a lot of folks around California are definitely dealing with extreme heat. And we hear it all the time from the tribes that we're really honored to support and serve, from tech tribes in Southern California for sure are dealing with the impact of more extreme heat, as are many of our Tribal Climate Health Project tribal advisors that we're really fortunate to work with, and tribes that I get to work with through tribal capacity building program from Strategic Growth Council, and tribes basically all over the state. If they weren't already hot, they're starting to experience the effects of more extreme heat. And we all know that it's getting hotter, but we don't always have a good idea of what the impact of that heat is going to look like when it hits our particular community. And so for the tribes I get to work with, that means a lot of different things. It might mean that elders and children are in more danger due to heat-related illness, or perhaps it's power outages that are affecting cooling or the access to medical treatments like dialysis. We see a range of impacts, from access to outdoor activity or cultural resources that affect physical health, or even spiritual health in terms of access to our resources. We see ecological differences like our riparian creek habitats getting overgrown, or traditional food sources or agricultural products under threat. And greater allergens or various kinds of ozone and smog pollutants that are leading to respiratory problems. So it's important that we have this kind of information available to us. Some of this information is available to tribes. It is publicly accessible, but it's often in so many different places, and it's not necessarily presented in a way that we call community ready. So like credible, meaningful, relevant, easy to understand, ready for you to like communicate it to tribal council and your community members and funders too. So the EISI, for the Exposures, Impacts, and Strategies Inventory tool, EISI, was originally designed as an Excel tool started about 9 years ago to reduce the burden of external fact-finding for tribal climate vulnerability assessments. So you can braid all this publicly accessible information together more easily alongside your own tribe's perspectives, knowledge, and values. And so we provided a lot of tools and trainings, templates, and direct support to tribes across the country, especially here in California, over the last 9 years, and including administering something we call the National Tribal Resilience Data Work Group. So we've just become real data focused program, because we know this is a big obstacle for tribes, and doing some of their adaptation work is really having the information available to them. So, we have a lot going on in this space, not just this tool that we're going to show you, which is now an online extreme heat version of the EISI tool, which is an interactive web-based tool specifically focused on extreme heat. We think this is our first entry point into getting into a more web-based, easy-to-use tool, which has lots of visualizations, and you get to see it all today. But we also do a lot of other things around data. We're currently working with a bunch of data experts and our tribal advisors on identifying ways to overcome wildfire health and water supply data gaps. We have a white paper coming soon. We also have a published paper coming out with our friends from affiliates of NOAA on tribal resilience data needs. We just think it's really important to uncover climate blind spots, and so important to help inform meaningful action in communities. So we're really excited to debut this tool with you. It's a long time coming, and it's with a long-time partner. So thanks so much to Paula, as well as our friends at the Public Health Alliance. And that means I get a chance to say hello to Colleen Bodenreiner with Public Health Alliance. And they are going to give a demo of this tool. And like I said, please interact in the chat. And the first thing I actually want you to do before we move on to that, we have a quick poll. And all we want to do here is just hear a little bit from you, and that'll be mainly tribes in the room, about your heat-related planning challenges. So let's go ahead and just launch that poll.
So sorry, Angie. Once I started sharing my screen, the poll option went away. So I'm going to pause and see if that will bring it back.
Well, we can always just move along too. How about we do this? Let's do this just in the chat. Be very interested in folks in the room that are working with tribes, telling us a little bit about some of the challenges you might be facing as you work to plan for extreme heat. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and hand off to Colleen. Thanks so much, Colleen.
Thanks, Angie. Let me share my screen. And I'll move on the next. Okay. So yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, like Angie mentioned, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to demonstrate and train you all on this Easy for Extreme Heat online tool. It's been 2 years in the making, and it's been a really big pleasure to work with both Process Sustainably and Paula Band of Mission Indians over the course of those 2 years. And again, we might have a limited amount of time at the end for questions, so please put your questions in the chat as they come up, and we'll do our best to answer them. All right, so what is the Easy for Extreme Heat online tool? It is a free interactive web tool that guides your tribe step by step through an extreme heat vulnerability assessment. And with the Easy for Extreme Heat online tool, you can assess your tribe's past, present, and future extreme heat exposures. You can identify related secondary exposures that are exacerbated by extreme heat, like air quality. You can evaluate extreme heat impacts and how they might impact your tribe's most important community assets. And you can discover adaptation strategies that you can consider implementing to protect your tribe from future extreme heat impacts. And the tool is really meant for tribal environmental professionals, tribal governments, tribal serving organizations, and anyone supporting tribal climate resilience. So a few practical tips before we start the demo. Going through the tool takes approximately 30 minutes. Any of the inputs that you make in the tool, which we'll talk more about during the demo, is stored in your account and is only viewable to you and site administrators. Your progress in the tool is saved automatically, and so you can leave and return at any time without worrying about your losing your progress. And yeah, you're really encouraged to engage community members early in the process. So a lot of this tool relies on you having a good understanding of your community's values and priorities with regards to extreme heat. And so we encourage you to engage your community beforehand. And the last thing that I'll say is, while the tool is organized in a step-by-step fashion, you can always go back to a previous section and modify it at any time if you change your mind or if you have an additional thought. And in terms of how to access the tool, it's a really simple process. You just go to our landing page, which is easy.healthyplacesindex.org. And you enter your email, and you'll get a one-time password sent to your account, and you can log in that way. And so with that, we'll get into our demo. All right. So once you've logged into this tool, this is what you'll see. You'll see a button that says My Inventories, and when you click on it, this is where you can find all of your saved inventories once you've created them. And in our case, we want to create a new inventory, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll click Start Creation, and it'll set up the whole tool for us. So now that we've officially created our inventory, you can see that the tool has 7 steps laid out on this left side, and we'll walk through each of them using Paula Band of Mission Indians as an example. And so the first step is to find your area. And what we're doing in this step is, before we look at any data on extreme heat exposures or impacts, we first need to select the area that represents our tribe. And this can be based on reservation boundaries, current or historical tribal lands, and/or tribe population distribution. And there's a few ways you can select a tribal area. So the first one is to use this dropdown, which contains a list of tribes. And when you click on a specific tribe, or you can also type it in and click on it, the tool automatically selects the census tracts that intersects with your tribe's boundaries. So if you click on Paula, we can see that it's automatically highlighted in red, the 2 census tracts that intersect with Paula's boundaries. The second way you can select a tribal area is by selecting census tracts directly on the map. So if I take those out, I can click on tracts around the area. I can also deselect, and and change the selection that way. So this is a good option if you want to include ancestral lands or things that are not tribal boundary related. For this example, I'll just use these 2 census tracts. And once you're happy with your selection, you want to click Generate Data for the selected tribe. And while that's happening, I'll just mention that you might have heard me use the word census tracts. That's really, it's a geography used by the Census Bureau, and we use it because most of our data is reported at the census tract level. All right, so after we find our area, this takes us to our next step, which is evaluating extreme heat exposures. And our goal in this step is to determine the overall risk of extreme heat to the polla community based on the data that we see in this page and our own understanding of extreme heat in the area. And so to do that, we want to look on all of this data on extreme heat below. So we'll look at each indicator. And if you want to find out more information about an indicator, like its definition or its data source, you can just click on this blue icon. And you'll see everything about the indicator. So when you look at an indicator, you'll also see that each indicator has 4 values on the left-hand side, which shows the values for that indicator over time. So historical, current, mid-century, and end century. And to the right of these values is a trend line that visualizes that change over time. For data that we find particularly informative and that we're interested in seeing in a summary report at the end of the tool, you could also see it right here in the sidebar. For data that you find particularly notable, you can click this Add to Community Profile button, and it'll pop up in this kind of community profile step that we'll get to in kind of at the end of the tool. But that'll just let you see a summary of the data that you find most relevant and most interesting to your tribe at the end. All right, so after we look at all this data, I might also select annual number of warm nights. We'll use the slider to select the level of risk of extreme heat that polla faces. So it ranges from none, very low, low, medium, high, and very high. And so when we make our selection, we want to consider the data that's relevant and important to your tribe and your own understanding of extreme heat exposure in your community. And so that should be based on this data here, but it should also be based on things like community input, tribal reports, observations, and anecdotes. So in our case, we'll rank the extreme heat exposure for polla as high. And we chose this rank because of the sharp increases in future extreme heat days and warm nights that we see here. All right. Moving on to step 3. So in step 3, we'll be evaluating secondary exposures. And these are environmental conditions that are triggered or worsened by extreme heat, like poor air quality. So for each secondary exposure in the tool, so we air quality, water contamination, and food shortage. We'll look at the data for each one and determine the overall risk of exposure, of that exposure to the polla community using the slider. So let's use water contamination as an example. So looking at the data, we have data on drinking water contaminants, impaired bodies of water, and nitrates. And again, like in the previous section, if you want to find out more about an indicator, you can click on it and find its definition and its data source. So when you look at an indicator in this section, each indicator shows 3 things. So you'll first see the value on the left, which is the actual number for your community. So for example, for nitrates, the value is the actual concentration of nitrates in community water systems in our tribal area, which is 0.8 milligrams per liter. In the middle, you can see the percentile rank interpretation, which is a sentence that tells you how your tribal area compares to all other census tracts in California. And that's also known as a percentile rank. So in this case, we can see that our tribal area has more nitrates than only 10% of other tracts in California. So that's relatively low. As I'm looking at the data, I'm also going to take the opportunity, like in the previous step, to add any indicators to the community profile that I'm interested in. And you can see they'll show up in this sidebar over here. So after we look at the data, we'll use this slider at the top to select the level of risk that water contamination poses to Paula. And so like in the previous step, we want to consider both this data in the tool as well as in any information that we have about the exposure based on community feedback, tribal reports, observations, or anecdotes. And so in this case, because of the high percentile values for drinking water contaminants and impaired bodies of water in the Paula area, we can conclude that that Paula has a high risk of water contamination. So we'll go ahead and make that selection. And that brings us to our next step after we're done looking at secondary exposures. So we arrive at this community assets step. And this step is a little bit different than the others. In this step, we're really ranking the community assets. So those are the resources and values that are important for your community to protect in the face of extreme heat. And this is a critical step because knowing which assets are most important to your tribe will help you factor in how extreme heat impacts might affect those assets in the next step. And we really highly recommend that you conduct a community survey to understand your tribal community's experiences, values, and priorities regarding extreme heat and climate change so that you can use those results to inform this section. And actually, the Tribal Climate Health Project has a survey template and other resources that you can use to help you with that, which will be posted in the chat. So for this step, we'll look at each asset. Assets are grouped into different categories, as you can see here. And we'll assign them a ranking either based on the results of the climate community survey or your understanding of your community's priorities. And so I'll go ahead and select a few of those here. Just as an example. So yeah, you can do socioeconomic health. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean I do mean to interrupt because I'm interrupting. Just give me a second. Just bear in mind, we're going through this as an example. So we're not selecting something for everything, but when you do this yourself, do them all. You're going to want to do them all.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Shasta. And so you'll go through each of them and select it based on the survey or your understanding of your community's priorities. And also at the bottom, we have this area where you can add and rank custom assets if your tribe has specific assets that aren't represented in this broader list. So for example, Paula has a native seed library that I'll include, and it'll show up just like any other asset, and I can go ahead and rank it, and it'll go ahead. Yeah, it'll show up. So yeah, at this point, yeah, I wanna invite Angie to kind of comment on this asset section if you want to add anything.
This is kind of a unique and hallmark aspect of the process that Tribal Climate Health Project has developed, and having done a lot of tribal adaptation plans, it just seemed really important to integrate the values of the tribe into the decision-making process. And it really, when you do this in person, say you do a workshop or even a survey with folks, it's hard to rank this, but it really does matter because it we don't want to just take the Western data to say that heat's going to get really bad and that dictates everything that we spend our limited time and dollars on. Tribes often want to, they want to focus on the things that they want to protect the most. It's a tough decision-making process, but it shows up later on as we look at impacts to help us better rank and inform the things that we really want to be able to focus on in the adaptation plan, because we want to put our focus and attention on the things, protecting the things that are the most important.
I had to find the unmute button. Thanks, Angie. All right, and so now that we've ranked our assets, we're ready to move on to the next step that Angie mentioned, which is impacts. So here we're going to review data on various extreme heat impacts and, like before, rank the level of risk that it poses to Paula based on several factors. And knowing which impacts are most severe can help us prioritize various adaptation strategies that we want to spend our time, money, and effort pursuing later on. So for each impact, there are three things that we want to consider or look at before making a ranking. And so let's look at this heat-related stress impact section, for example. So the first thing that we want to consider is our related threatened community assets tab, which shows you the community assets that are relevant to this impact, which is heat-related stress, along with the priority level that you selected in the previous step. The second thing that we want to look at is the impact indicators tab, which displays data that measures heat-related stress, illness, and death itself. So in this case, we can see that emergency department visits due to heat and hospitalizations due to heat directly measure heat-related stress, illness, and death. And finally, we have our impact modifiers tab, which displays data on various community characteristics that influence a community's sensitivity or ability to adapt to extreme heat. So for example, certain populations like older adults or young children are more sensitive to the physical impacts of extreme heat, while other populations, like down here, we have workers experiencing high environmental exposure. Other populations are just more exposed to extreme heat and therefore are at greater risk due to their exposure. So we have a variety of demographic characteristics that impact extreme heat sensitivity here. And again, I should note that you can add any indicators here that you want to see later on. You can select add to community profile for any one of these that stand out to you. All right. So to kind of give you an example of how we would make this ranking, because this is a lot of information to consider. Let's use the respiratory illness impact as an example. So in step 4 and the previous step, we ranked physical wellness as a high priority community asset based on the results of the community survey that we got. We'll also review impact indicator data on asthma and asthma emergency room visits that shows a high severity and likelihood for extreme heat, or sorry, for respiratory illness in the community. And then finally, we'll look at impact modifier data that shows a high population of older adults and residents with, older adults and, older adults 65 and older and adults 75 and older. And so since the community ranked physical wellness as a high priority community asset and the tribe has limited capacity to adapt to this threat, we're going to assign this a high vulnerability level. And then Angie, is there anything else that you want to add about kind of summarizing all this information and making a determination here?
Well, this is another sort of unique thing I think we're doing with this tool. So many tools will tell you about the exposure level information, like what's changing in the climate. And then you have to make some leap of imagination about what that might actually look like, how that will affect the impacts on the ground. So this is really the big moment of determining vulnerability. So when we say impacts, we're really looking at where is your community susceptible to certain vulnerabilities that are coming from extreme heat. This is not an extensive list, and we'll get into that. This is the kinds of stuff we were able to sort of scrub and aggregate for you, so it's a lot easier. So this, like at this moment, this is the reality of doing an adaptation plan or a vulnerability assessment. You should be considering what were the severity of the primary and secondary exposures. What does my community care about, right? So what do we want to protect? What does the impact already look like? Do we have data to show us what's changed already, or are there projections for what might change? And then those impact modifiers. So we talk about that as population sensitivity and adaptive capacity. So here we've like rolled it all up in a little plate to say, look at all this and now make a choice about your risk level. And there's more information you could pull in here too. But this has done a lot of the work that you might have to otherwise manually do.
And Scarlett, I see that you have your hands up, but we'll take questions at the end because yeah, I just want to make sure we have time to get through the whole demo. But thank you. All right. So that brings us to this community profile step, which you've seen us building over the course of us going through the tool. So far we've evaluated our exposures to extreme heat and related secondary exposures. We've prioritized assets, things like built environment assets and cultural and spiritual assets that we wanted to protect in the face of extreme heat. And we've assessed the risk of various extreme heat impacts to our tribe. And the community profile offers you a summary of everything that you've done so far. So it shows you all the exposures and the risk levels that you've selected for them, as well as any of the data that you've selected to add to the community profile. You'll also see a table with the community assets that you've ranked, organized by the priority level. And finally, you'll see the list of impacts and the risk level you've assigned them. We obviously didn't go through all the impacts, but you would see the risk level if you selected it. And again, under each impact, you'll see each of the community indicators that you wanted to add to the community profile in here. So all of this leads us to this list of adaptation strategies that you see here. So the adaptation strategies that you see here are those that are most relevant to your top ranked exposures, assets, and impacts, so that you can find strategies that might be most useful for your tribe to pursue to increase your tribe's resilience to future extreme heat impacts. Then in addition to helping you evaluate adaptation strategies, this community profile can serve as a helpful reference when you're developing grant applications, drafting climate change assessments, or providing data for communications on future extreme heat threats. Angie, is there anything that you want to add about this section, especially about adaptation strategies here?
EISI, at this stage, this tool is really mainly built for the vulnerability assessment process. And this has become, and EISI has always been a suggestion. Here's a menu of what we know about indicators, and here's the kinds of data sources you can use. And here we're presenting some possible strategies. You know your community best. So anything in here is editable, overridable, right? So like basically these strategies, you might know something much, much better. We're just aggregating some of those strategies that we know and have vetted through our tribal advisors and various tribal adaptation planning processes.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. All right. And so the very last step of this EISI for Extreme Heat tool is this generate report feature. And so this feature generates a Word document that can serve as the basis of an extreme heat vulnerability assessment report. So it's a little bit different than the community profile. It's not just throwing the inputs that you've put into the tool back at you. It's actually it's actually doing a lot more. So it does a few things. It summarizes common background information on extreme heat that's applicable to all California tribes. It outlines and it summarizes the ecological, human, and cultural impacts from extreme heat on tribes, including boilerplate information on those impacts. It automatically outputs data from the EISI for Extreme Heat Online tool, and it places it has placeholder text that encourages you to include observational or other tribe specific data. So a lot of the data that we have in the tool is limited to what's publicly available, but there's also a lot of really rich tribe specific data and observational data that your tribe holds that we want to encourage you to include in this kind of extreme heat vulnerability assessment. And finally, we also have like different infographics and tables that summarizes some of your inputs from the tool, including your priority selections for assets and risk selections for impacts. And so the way this works is you enter some basic information about your tribe here, like your tribe name, your region, your county, and some information about the authorship and leadership of your tribe. And you'll click Generate Report, and that will automatically download a Word document that's fully editable and fully customizable. I'm not going to download it now, but yeah, so then you'll be able to edit it and enter, especially for that kind of sensitive or tribal specific knowledge, we want you to have a secure place to do that, as opposed to entering it on a web-based tool. So that provides you an option to include some of that information in a more secure way. And the last thing I'll mention about this is that we'll be doing a full training on this report feature in October, which you can register for through the link in the chat that's going to be posted shortly. And with that, I think we'll actually have some time for questions. So I can actually, we have a few wrap-up slides that I'll pass on to Angie, if I can bring them up.
Great. So I just want to take another moment. Thanks to Shasta for always taking the leap of faith with us and leading the charge here with Paula. And thanks to Colleen and the whole team for having actually made our wildest dreams come true. This is far better than Excel. Holy moly. Now we say, easy adaptation planning made easy, for real this time. The Excel tool isn't as easy as it could have been, but the easy tool still exists over there. And it has all the different exposure levels. So if you're looking for other stuff outside of just extreme heat, it's there. We're always happy to help you with it. And I just say, this is our first foray into this, right? So we would like to continue to build onto this tool, more data, more refinements, more exposures. And so that's where we're hopefully headed next. And just to say thanks again, there's lots of back and forth, things like this tool, this report is a Word tool because for Public Health Alliance, that was hard to do, turning this thing into a Word document that was editable for you all, because we knew how important it was for you not to be asked for sensitive data to be put into some system that you don't control. So lots of good decision making throughout this process. So let's see, what's next? We want to tell you that we think we've made this tool fairly intuitive to use, but there is help. And so the team like Lori and Serena Vega, who, by the way, have worked really hard on the launch of this tool and getting all the guidance together for it, they're going to be available to help you use the tool and as you go through your adaptation or extreme heat planning processes. There is also going to be a full training diving deeper into that report tool, which I think is really going to be good if you're really interested, and that's going to be on October 15th. That report tool, just the last thing I want to say is the EISI for extreme heat data isn't exhaustive. It's not complete necessarily, but that report gives a broader sense of the kinds of information you're going to want to consider as you do your adaptation plan for extreme heat, kind of fills in some gaps and gives you a place to put your tribal knowledge, perspectives, and information. Okay, what did I miss? I think it's time to go to questions.
While we wait for questions, I'm going to add a few things. I want to also acknowledge the California Energy Commission, which gave us the funding for this through 2 rounds of the Tribal Research Grant. And also, I know I take the leap of faith and then I just sort of wander off and let all these wonderful people do the work and then get to come back and get thanked for it. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, yes, obviously I've been a part of it, but I really appreciate the team and all the hard work they've done to get us to this point. Because I remember when Angie first showed me the EISI tool, I curled up under my desk and cried because I am not an Excel person. And it scared the ever living daylights out of me. And I said, we've got to turn this into something where you can just like click a drop down and get your information. And holy cow, it's happening. Only for extreme heat so far, but for any of you online right now who work for agencies with money, you've got my number. Help us put this out there for air and water and storms and other human health impacts, and make this thing everything that tribes in California need it to be. So last thing too, the report feature, Colleen showed you that it generates this report that you can save. When you open that, it has boilerplate language in there. So it's not just going to have the stuff that you saw on the screen that you then have to add your own text to. It says the stuff. And this was based on the vulnerability assessment that Angie developed for Paula. So you can change that however you want. And it's got spaces in there where it shows, like, I think they're either in red or highlighted or something, where you add your own tribe's name and your own tribe's demographics and specific issues. But so it's what AI would be if AI wasn't the devil. It's amazing. I'm not an AI fan. This took real brains from real people. All right, I'll stop.
I think Scarlett had a question at one point.
I think that I answered my own question. It was a really small one with the impact section, and there was like a vulnerability, kind of a threat and assessment range of high or very high showing up as soon as you opened it. And I think that that was just summarizing what you had put in from the asset section right before. So it wasn't giving you an assessment based on all the data there. It was just kind of pulling it forward and then letting you, okay. Yeah. It was just, I wasn't sure if that was a recommendation or just like filtered through some. Yeah. It's incredible. Amazing work, you all. This is really exciting. That was the first one.
Thanks. And if anybody else is confused by that, that's helpful feedback as well. So
We did have conversations like, oh, should we try to like calculate some recommended risk level based on what we know? But I think it's good to present it and allow the users to decide. But thanks, that means a lot from you, Scarlett. We know you guys are data groupies like we are over here and doing good work.
I quickly messaged my colleague, who is an amazing data scientist too, and building very cool apps on our Shiny, because I think that that's what this is built on. Is that correct, Colleen? Oh,
no, we have a custom, really wonderful map developer that we work with called Access Maps, and they developed the Healthy Places Index, and
Yep.
They developed these tools as well.
Okay, very cool. Anyway, just excited to see other helpful tools.
So we had a hand, but then the hand just went down. Was that Tamashio?
Yeah. This Tamashio, Scotts Valley Band of Pomo. Um, I I logged in as we were talking, and I tried to check it out so I could move with you guys. But I tried to access my tribe, Scotts Valley, and our federal trust land was we got it in 25, in January of 25. And when I was looking on the map, I didn't see it on there. So I just wanted that to be noted. Unless I did something wrong. I don't know. But our federal trust land is now in Vallejo, California. and I just didn't see it there. That's all.
Yeah, so we pull our data from
It's the BIA's data
it's a
set.
BIA data
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
So I don't know how updated that is. I'd have to go and check which version we pulled, but if there's a newer version, it'd be relatively simple to kind of update that in the tool. The version I pulled would have been from about maybe like a year, a little bit less than a year ago. So
So
Well,
The
yeah,
other
it
thing
was
is,
should be in there.
Tomasio, you can just click
Okay.
and add a census tract to your data by just clicking on the map. So for
Okay.
tribes that also have non-contiguous lands, you can pick, Vallejo, and then you can pick Mendocino and
Oh, okay.
take over Kashaya.
and that's
Okay.
relevant also to the non-federally recognized tribes who don't have trust lands. Just you can scroll on the map just like you would on Google Maps to your area and then click on it, and those census tracts will pop up, and you can use those to gather data that's specific to your region. Thank you for pointing that out. You guys get to be our little, beta testers.
Well, thank you. It's a
Also,
great map, though. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And congratulations on your trust land. That's awesome.
Yeah, since 1991, we're established as a tribe and a federal tribe landless, and so 25 of January we did get that land. But again, it's not developed, but it's just there. So thank you.
That's good.
Tomasio, if we can help you, we have our technical assistance available. So maybe we can throw that back I think it's in the chat right now. That just means get some one-on-one help on how to use this tool. And if you hit any snags, we're super happy to help.
Thank you.
There was a question in here from Tawny. I don't know if we just want to like lift that up. Let's see, did that get addressed already?
Yeah, Tawny had a bunch of questions. If do you want to come offline or come on off mute and
You all were great at answering them on the fly during the presentation, so kudos to you for that. Yeah, I went through and did a demo of just kind of ran through the tool with you all. I found it really interesting to see the different data that showed up. And I did notice similar mapping thing as Tomasio. Um, when I entered Dry Creek, it did show like a census area for us, but when you go to the final page to generate the report, it didn't show the outline of the area like it did for Paula. So mostly like a note for your team on that. But maybe it's more of a manual thing, like you were saying for Tomasio.
Do you
yeah,
think
thank you. I can check that out.
we have a place where people can let us know when they're having bugs or problems, right?
I don't think we've set that up quite yet, but we can go ahead and set that up and have that ready.
yeah, I think that would be a great thing to have. And again, relying on BIA trust maps is not always ideal. Their information is not as up to date as we might want it to be. But as long as you're able to identify the census tracts that include the areas of interest for you, like our census tracts includes a big chunk of the La Jolla Reservation too. And that's also usually the deal in places that have small populations. The census tracts tend to be bigger and cover a lot more. So, but you're going to still, Heat in La Jolla is pretty much the same as Heat in Paula. So hopefully they're not mad that we're overlapping and taking some of their data in our map. But I think we're about to be kicked out of here, y'all. So thank you so much for being here for our demo. And then we'll go back to the boring room with the boring energy people. I'm so mean. But I love this stuff so much more. The energy stuff is boring.
I
Thank you
agree,
so much, everyone.
especially if you're off grid.
Yeah.